Joining me tonight for a special interview for our Suburban Jewish News, Yair Szlak, the CEO of Federation CJ, who's coming live from Poland. He's on a very special mission. We've seen with horror the acts going on in Ukraine with Russia. It's almost like something that we never would have believed that would happen in our lifetime. Yair, you're there. Federation has done a magnificent job. You raised a significant amount of money. But tell us, you're there with Gail Adelson. What are you doing in Poland?
Hi, Mike. Good to speak to you. It is 12:30 in the morning, Warsaw time. I've been on the ground since 2 p.m. Monday, so just upwards of 30 hours here in Poland. And these have been probably some of the most eye-opening hours of my life working in the Jewish community. We arrived in Warsaw yesterday at 2 o'clock, as I mentioned, and the first thing we visited was 4 hotels that were set up here by the Jewish Agency for Israel, one of our partners that we're funding through this emergency campaign for Ukraine. In these 4 hotels, Jewish refugees who are coming across the border are housed for a total of about 72 hours. It's sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but around 72 hours, these Jewish refugees who have made a decision to make Aliyah to Israel are processed by the Jewish Agency and the Israeli embassy here in Warsaw and turned around and sent to Israel. Yesterday, I got to meet some of those refugees who are making their way to Israel, and the stories, Mike, that I've heard are heartbreaking. Families whose lives have completely been torn apart, who've had to flee their country that they love, and we have to understand they love their country, with nothing more than their bags. I heard from a gentleman who's in his 70s who's to get anything out of the house. They didn't have any papers. They didn't have passports. They crossed the border, and because they had worked with the Jewish Agency for Israel before, their daughter made Aliyah. The Jewish Agency was able to replicate all their documents. And their daughter, who is physically disabled, lives in Israel. And when asked why choose Israel at this time, the gentleman looked at us and, of course, translated Russian and said, "If any country can treat its disabled the way Israel does, that's a country where I want to live next."
Wow.
And he was so proud to be going to make Aliyah, to meet his daughter. Overwhelming our first day in Warsaw was the lack of men. Everyone we met, almost to exclusivity, are women and children. This older man is one of the exceptions to that rule. But it's an overwhelming sense of loss because everyone talks about who they left behind. Husbands, brothers, sisters, sons, fathers. And they talk about it very openly because they weren't allowed to get out. You understand that there is a conscription now since March 24th. We're coming up. It's March 23rd. Since February 24th. It's March 23rd here in Warsaw. Tomorrow marks 1 month to this horrible war. And close to 3.5 million refugees have fled the Ukraine, and 2 million have made their way to Poland. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it's so ironic because usually at this time, and I know they announced today that the March of the Living is canceled, not necessarily because of COVID, but because of the war. And ironically, for years, this is the time when people, the children from high schools go to Poland. They learn about the terrible past, and then they go to Israel and they see what our future is. But unfortunately, we are seeing scenes that we thought, we're not comparing this to the Holocaust, but this is a genocide, what we're seeing. And we're seeing this in our lifetime. And it's so ironic. You're in Poland, but for a whole different reason.
Mike, this world has said never again. I landed here yesterday And this is my 9th time visiting Poland. And every time I visited here, it was to commemorate Jewish life, to celebrate Jewish life pre-war, to commemorate Jewish life that was lost during the Holocaust. And I came here and I never wanted to see sunshine in Poland, right? It was one of those places where I was okay just going to visit to mourn what we lost. And I came here yesterday with a different feeling, because, and I'm not talking about myself, but we're here to witness people saving lives. It's extraordinary what's happening here in Poland. It's extraordinary what's happening all over Eastern Europe, but the lives that are being saved by the Polish people, welcoming them to their homes all over Eastern Europe, whether it's in Hungary or Budapest, and Romania and Moldova, they're being welcomed into their homes. Most of the people we've spoken to here over the last 36 hours, they want to go home. They believe that they want to go home, whether Jewish or not. They want to go home to Ukraine. They believe that's their homeland.
Right, but who knows if it'll ever be safe again.
I made my way. No one knows. I made my way to the border today. The Medica border actually was just on CNN. It is the largest border crossing between Poland and the Ukraine. It's one of 9 border crossings, but it is the largest that has received the most refugees. Words cannot explain the overwhelming sense of humanity that's going on there. First and foremost, it's incredible to watch the world come together in tents, handing out everything, you name it, and they're handing it out. Food and toiletries and clothes and children's books and anything you were looking for when you crossed that border with your child. The world is there to welcome you. The first tents on that border are Jewish tents. The Israeli flag flies first and foremost. Any refugee walking across that border sees the Israeli flag. They were there first, and they're not just saving Jews, they're saving anyone who comes across.
Right.
And it's incredible because I ran into a Jew from Mexico City who set up a tent representing the Jews of Mexico. And
Wow.
The tent next door is the Egyptian Red Crescent working side by side to rescue refugees in a crisis that I don't think this world...
So ironic.
I pray this world will never see again, but I don't think this world has...
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that, I went to Warsaw myself when I worked for the Canadian Jewish Congress on a mission with Holocaust survivors. I went to the camps. We went to Israel. I worked for Canadian Jewish Congress with the Soviet Jewry movement when we went and protested in front of the consulate. And now we see this. You're seeing people, Yair, who are coming across the border with like shopping bags with everything they own. It's just, I think of living in Côte Saint-Luc in my nice home where, your home is your castle. And these people had everything taken away from them, leaving without their families, their whole life upended. But the good news is that Federation CJA and the Jewish Agency are there. So what's going to happen, Yair, in Montreal? Do we expect to accommodate a lot of Jewish refugees from Ukraine?
Mike, I hope so. I hope that we do see refugees coming across the Atlantic to settle in North America. Like I said, the overwhelming majority that I've heard from are looking to go home. I just don't know if that's a reality. We don't know how long this terrible war is going to take place. Federation CJA has led out along with all the federations across North America, on a fundraising campaign to raise, at this point, we're looking at about $85 million. What we're more concerned about, I shouldn't say more, is the close to 500,000 Russian Jews who may soon find themselves again under an iron curtain. And what happens if they want to leave? We may see a Jewish surge of Aliyah that we haven't seen since the first Russian Aliyah in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And that is something that we need to prepare for. Whether it's in Canada or in Israel, it's going to take a monumental effort on behalf of all communities to accept these refugees, settle them, get them jobs, and get them back on their feet after this terrible war.
My final question, you're there during still a worldwide pandemic. It hasn't gone away. How are you staying safe there from COVID?
So we're wearing masks everywhere. You'll see me if you see any of the footage. I'm always with the mask. The group is always with the mask, and we keep COVID distance where possible, and all COVID rules still apply here.
Obviously, these poor refugees, they're packed into trains and they're coming across the border. I mean, obviously, they can't be focusing on COVID, and then you worry about outbreaks from that occurring as well.
COVID is not on their minds at all, Mike.
No, not at all.
I met. We're in Lublin today. For those of you who visited Poland, there's a yeshiva, Yeshivat Chochmei Lublin, a very famous yeshiva in Lublin, destroyed by the Nazis. The Nazis marched the yeshiva Bachurim, the students, out of the yeshiva and killed them all. Today, that yeshiva is acting as a safe house for refugees who are coming in. There were 76 refugees living there today. When I visited, I met this incredible single mother who broke all of our hearts. When she was asked, she was crying the whole time. She couldn't talk. She was asked to share her story, and she looked at us and she said, "I can't talk about this terrible war." And she told us about her days in the bunker, sitting against the wall for 7 days with no water, no toilets, no food, hoping that they could get out. Eventually, she made it out with the support of the Jewish Agency and the Joint Distribution Committee, thanks to the money that we've raised and supporting those organizations. And she looked at us and she said, "I had to teach my daughter at the age of 15 to grow up really fast."
Wow.
And she broke our hearts because it's such a reality that they're all facing, Mike. It is, I go back to this, and I say it with tremendous pause. You spoke about standing in front of the Russian consulate, "Let my people go."
Right.
I think it's time for us to be activists again.
I agree.
Never again. Never again means never again. I think we need to activate as society, as humanity, and stand up against what's happening here, because we promised the world never again. And what we're witnessing today is contrary to all of that.
We'll end on that note because you've just said it all, Yair. Thank you for making the time to talk with us. Thank you, Federation CJ, to all of the supporters, to all of the other organizations that are working on this dossier. Stay safe there.
Thank you, Mike, for your time.
Thank you, Yair.